The rain comes down in a cold, steady sheet, turning the city lights into trembling streaks on the wet pavement at a dim bus stop under the hum of a flickering street lamp. A small figure sits wrapped in a threadbare jacket too big for his thin shoulders. A wheelchair sits beside him, its wheels smeared with mud. His fingers drum a nervous rhythm on his knee, a rhythm that betrays a lifetime of waiting. He is 10 years old. A man in a cheap windbreaker steps away from the bus. Without him, he looks back once, not with guilt, but with practiced indifference, and walks into the night. The boy watches him go, confusion and hurt tightening the lines around his mouth. The street sounds swallow the footsteps. The boy hugs his jacket tighter and tries to make his small body as invisible as possible beneath the awning of the bus stop. When the bus pulls away, the rain intensifies. People pass without a glance, heads buried in hoods in the glow of their phones. The boy's wheelchair has a bent wheel and a missing seatbelt. He fumbles with the wheel, attempting to roll it forward, and the wheel stutters and then jams. Tears mix with the rain on his cheeks, but he blinks them away. He has learned to be quiet. Tears only invite questions. One wants to answer. A limousine glides to a stop further down the street, an island of black lacquer and tinted windows. A man steps out, not from the limousine but from a private driver's door, as if he's part of the night's backdrop. He is in his early 40s, his coat tailored, his hair still damp from a hurried ride. He carries a small leather briefcase and a presence that makes people turn slightly. When he walks by, he walks with purpose, but his steps slow reflexively. When he sees the boy, he pauses beneath the same flickering light. For a second, he just watches. The stuck wheelchair, the small shoulders, the way the boy tries to cover himself from the rain with that oversized jacket. He takes off his own coat, drapes it over the boy's shoulders. Without thinking, the boy looks up. Surprise sharpens his features. "Are you okay?" the man asks. The boy nods, then shakes his head, unsure which is the right answer. The man crouches so they are eye level. He doesn't rush to conclusions. He asks his name. The boy says it quietly. The man asks about the wheelchair. The boy explains in halting sentences. His speech is slow, but there is clarity behind every word he says. His father left. The man listens. Behind the man's calm exterior, there is a memory, a father's absence that once hollowed out his own youth. He doesn't reveal that yet. Traffic hums. The man looks at his watch, then at the boy again. The city can be cruel and fast, but sometimes in that rush people can find one small sliver of time to decide to do something different. He reaches into his coat and pulls out his phone. He dials. The call is short, efficient. He tells the driver to fetch a blanket from the trunk and to park the limo a block over. When the driver arrives, the man helps the boy into the back seat, careful, gentle, as if handling something fragile that must not be broken. He wraps the blanket around him and speaks softly about warm soup and dry clothes. He gives no lecture about lost buses or bad decisions. There is only immediate shelter and the kind of quiet attention the boy has almost forgotten exists. They drive to a hospital. The man says they will make sure the boy is safe and checked out. He signs paperwork, answers questions with the precise patience of someone used to cutting through red tape. Nurses and social workers scribble notes. But it is the man's face that stays with the boy, not a face that asks for proof of hurt, only a face that believes at first sight. At intake, they learn the boy's name, the circumstances, the father's claim that he could no longer care for him. The social worker asks for contact information, for details. The man listens and then speaks up. "Want him to stay here tonight," he says, "and tomorrow if you'll let me, I'll help find a better place for him." They ask his relationship to the child. He tells them he's a philanthropist, a blunt, strange word in a hospital intake form, and that he's willing to sponsor temporary care. The paperwork begins. Red tape is the slow part of miracles. They say he signs everything with his full name. Eyes steady, the boy falls asleep mid-sentence on the cot, a deep, exhausted sleep that finally allows his body to let go. The man watches him sleep from a chair by the bedside, remembering his own childhood nights when hunger and cold kept him awake. He thinks about the father who walked away like it was no big thing, and he feels a heat in his chest that is not anger so much as a decisive ache, a decision forming like a knot in his hands. The next morning, the social worker calls the boy's father. A phone conversation ensues. The father's voice is evasive, clipped. He claims he did what he had to do, that the boy was becoming a burden he couldn't afford, that things had to change. He refuses to take him back. The legal system moves in a cold, specific manner. There are forms to fill, investigations to conduct, and a provisional period where the boy is considered a ward until permanent arrangements are made. The man doesn't wait for justice to move at its usual pace. He arranges for the boy to be taken to a rehabilitation clinic, one with therapists and adaptive equipment he calls specialists, secures funding for medical assessments, and hires a caregiver who has experience with children and disability. He makes sure the clinic is in a neighborhood close enough to schools and parks, but quiet enough for healing. He signs checks without looking, as if money could stitch time back into place. Weeks pass. The boy learns to use a modified joystick on his wheelchair. He meets other children who ride the same waves of frustration and courage. He begins therapy sessions, speech therapy to strengthen his voice, occupational therapy to build independence, and counseling to help the emotional wounds that never show up on an X-ray. Meanwhile, the man watches from a distance, visiting in the afternoons, with paperbacks and sandwiches, never imposing, always present. He knows the value of presence. He asks about favorite games and cartoons. He learns the boy likes mechanical things and can spend hours taking apart a toy truck and putting it back together, a concentration that hushes his face into focus. One afternoon, the boy finds a loose gear behind the clinic shed and brings it to the man. They sit on a bench and fit it into a toy truck they've repaired together. The boy's fingers are sure and deft. The man watches the precision in the small hands and sees potential. Not pity, not charity, but possibility. It occurs to him that what the boy needs is not just care, but a home that believes in him. The man has a mansion that people admire in magazines, but his life inside those rooms is quieter. He built his fortune the long way. As a child, he learned to be scrappy, then he learned to be clever. He believes success without responsibility is hollow. He believes in giving in a way that changes outcomes, not just headlines. He petitions the court for temporary guardianship. He hires lawyers who are good at navigating family law and who treat the boy's case like a matter of urgency, not charity. The father fights back, citing poverty, claiming the boy is better off on his own. He says things that make the man's jaw clench, but the social workers' testimonies and the clinic reports are clear. The boy's best interest is security, continuity of care, and a supportive environment. The judge reviews statements and medical reports. The courtroom is hushed. The attorney for the father speaks in defensive tones, but the clinic's director speaks with an authority tempered by compassion. The judge rules for temporary guardianship. The decision is careful with language, but its meaning is sharp. The boy will stay with the man. While the court determines long-term placement, news of the case trickles through local outlets. A millionaire takes in an abandoned child. Some call it a PR move, a circus for social media. Others call it a lifeline. The man ignores the noise. He is not interested in applause. He is interested in the boy's laugh. When a toy truck finally rolls straight, they move into a house with ramps and widened doorways. The rooms smell of lemon oil and old books. The boy chooses a small blue room with a window that looks out onto a backyard where an old oak tree stands guard. The man hires an occupational therapist to redesign the kitchen so the boy can help with small tasks. They put a workbench in the garage where the boy can tinker. The man sits across from him, sometimes with a laptop open, sometimes with a comic book. They share quiet dinners where the clatter of utensils and the comfort of steady conversation make the house feel alive. School is an adjustment. The boy has an aide assigned to help with mobility and classroom participation. He struggles at first with reading, but with press and practice and a patient tutor, he starts to decode words. He is mocked by a few kids. Whispered calls that sting, but he also finds a friend in a girl who sits beside him in math and shares her lunch. The man celebrates each small victory with the boy. A test passed, a new phrase spoken clearly, a punchline landed with a grin. Months blur into a year. The father surfaces occasionally, often in the company of a different face, a woman with a tired smile or a man who wants to prove he's changed. The court system requires periodic check-ins, and the father is given chances to demonstrate stability, consistent employment, stable housing, and participation in parenting classes. He fails the tests in fits and starts. Sometimes it is addiction that pulls him back. Other times it is a pattern of choices that mimic the ones that made him walk away. In the first place, the man does not hide the truth from the boy. He explains in simple sentences where the legal process sits and that some people can change, while others cannot. He explains with a gentle firmness that love is not an obligation you forget how to perform. He tells the boy that families are sometimes made in different ways. One evening the boy, flushed with the kind of bravery children have when they're raw with questions, asks, Did he come back because he's sorry? The man sits on the edge of the bed and looks at the boy's face, which has grown in confidence and softness through this time. Some people come back, he says. Some people learn, some people don't. The important thing is that you're here now, and you're safe. The boy nods, then asks the question no child should ever have to confront. Will you keep me? The man's answer is simple, steady yes. Adoption proceedings begin. This time the man is thorough. He meets with adoption counselors, attends classes about parenting a child with a disability, and opens his life to scrutiny with the same meticulousness he brought to business deals. He knows that to commit is to accept the child wholly, the ways he will change, the needs he will have, the nights when worry might not let him sleep. He knows this is not charity. It's a covenant. The father fights the adoption. He appears in court with a stack of promises and a tear-streaked plea. He speaks of regret and flashes of memory about the boy's first steps, his first laugh. For a moment, there is a flicker of something like remorse, but the court listens to years, to patterns. It listens to experts who speak about stability in the child's best interest. The judge rules for adoption in favor of the man. The decision is not a punishment. It is a recognition of what the boy needs: consistent care, an advocate, someone who will be there when the world is cruel. After the adoption, the man changes his paperwork, but not the way he speaks to the boy. He signs the certificate and then takes the boy to the backyard with a kite and a camera. They fly the kite until the string is barely a tremor in his hand, and the boy laughs so hard it makes his whole face light up. That laugh is the man's real reward. Years go by. The boy grows taller and stronger. He learns to code, his fingers moving across a keyboard with the same precise care they once used to tinker with wheels. The therapist invites him to a robotics club where he learns to build small machines that can carry objects, climb ramps, even dance on command. His work wins small prizes. At local fairs, the man shows up at every event, clapping like a proud father. Always at the front with a camera. The father appears again later, thinner, older, and with a different tone. He has walked a hard road and finally, painfully, sobered into accountability. He asks to visit. It takes time, mediation, counseling, and supervised visits before trust is even a whisper. In the room, the man agrees to let the father see his son, but only when the boy is ready. Healing, they both learn, is not a race. During a supervised visit, the father sits across from his son in a community center and watches him build something. From a kit, the boy looks up, then down, then hands the small finished piece to his father. It is a tiny wheel assembly. The same sort of thing the boy used to repair as a child. The father holds it, and his hands tremble. "I'm sorry," the father says, and the words are small and worn but honest. The boy nods. He is older. Now he has learned boundaries. He says, "I forgive you." And the words are not a contract to forget, but a release he offers because he can, because holding on to fury would make him small. The father cries a clean kind of cry, not the erratic denial of the past, but a sorrow that admits wrongs. He asks if his son could visit sometimes. The man standing nearby meets the father's eyes and sees genuine regret. He nods. In time, he says, in time, the man's life changes in small ways that are profound. He builds a foundation that funds clinics and scholarships for children with disabilities. He uses his public platform to lobby for accessible infrastructure and better school accommodations. He writes op-eds about responsibility and the quiet obligations of wealth, but more than anything, his life is defined by dinners, bedtime stories, and the slow intimacy of daily routines with a boy who once waited at a bus stop for someone to come back. On days when the man thinks about the first night he found the boy, he remembers the rain and the way the city moved on as if nothing had happened. He remembers the flash of his own coat as he wrapped it around a shivering child, the smallness of his own hands at the moment, and how one decision can redirect a life. The boy grows into a young man who uses his disability as a lens rather than a limit. He invents a mobility device that is affordable and adaptable for children in low-income neighborhoods. He speaks at conferences and at his old school, the auditorium packed with kids who treat him like a pioneer because he refused to be defined by abandonment. The father watches from the back of one of those talks, a quiet figure who applauds when everyone else does. The sound reaches the young man's ears. He looks back, sees the man who once left, and for a moment, their eyes meet. It is neither reconciliation nor condemnation. It is the complex geography of lives that have broken and been pieced together again after the event. The father approaches. He kneels slightly, uncertain of the boundaries that once stretched so wide between them. "Thank you," he says to the young man, for staying. The young man places a hand on his father's shoulder. An almost imperceptible gesture that holds both history and mercy. You were gone. He says, but I stayed. The millionaire, now simply called by his first name, watches from the edge of the crowd. He smiles, not because his life has become perfect, but because it has become honest and rooted. He thinks of the night of the rain and the quiet decision that began everything. He had not set out to be a savior or a hero. He had simply chosen to do what was right in the smallest moment, and then to keep choosing it, day after day. Years later, the young man stands in a classroom full of children who are trying to learn to code. He leans over a small boy's shoulder and points at the screen. The boy's face mirrors his own from a lifetime ago. Uncertain, hopeful, hungry for someone who believes. The young man smiles and shows him the trick that taught him to make things move. He is patient. He is exact. He reminds the boy that wheels can be fixed, and people can be, too. Outside, a storm rolls in like another test. Inside the classroom, a small group keeps building, keeps fixing, keeps telling a different kind of story, one that begins with abandonment but does not end there. It ends with a choice again and again to remain,